of the statement. Nigeria's 2019 elections will be an important step in the country's democracy. If successful, the elections would consolidate democratic gains achieved in the last 2 decades since the transition from military to civilian democratic rule. The elections are also expected to be closely competed among the major political parties. President Muhammadu Buhari is seeking re-election after historic elections in 2015, when the country experienced its first transition to presidential power from the People's Democratic Party, which had been in power since the transition from military to civilian democratic rule in 1999, to the All Progressives Congress. Numerous positive developments have occurred since the 2015 elections that enhanced today's electoral environment in Nigeria. Some of these developments were noted in IRI and NDI's first pre-election statement in July. INEC has improved the voting process, notably through the introduction of continuous voter registration, adoption of simultaneous accreditation and voting, improvements to the secrecy of the ballot, and advancement of the smart card reader technology. Young people are motivated to participate in politics and to hold their representatives accountable through such initiatives as the Not Too Young to Run campaign. Citizens are deeply committed to democracy. Afrobarometer's 2017 survey found that 72% of Nigerians agree that democratic elections are the best means of choosing their country's leaders. Despite the above improvements in the administrative and procedural aspects of the voting process, deficits in the political process could undermine or compromise the democratic character of the 2019 elections. Numerous interlocutors with whom the delegation met commented on the lack of equitable competition within political parties regarding candidate selection, and relatedly, a penchant among parties to induce voter support through means that run contrary to the spirit of democratic franchise. For many Nigerians, the pervasive role of money in the campaign process lies at the heart of these concerns. My colleague, Sarah Jegadato, will now expand upon the improvements that the delegation has observed during its assessment.
The IRI-NDI delegation recognizes numerous positive developments initiated by electoral stakeholders, some of which followed the IRI-NDI July 2018 pre-election statement, that are contributing to an enhanced electoral environment. Improvements to election administration. The delegation notes that INEC has initiated several measures to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of voting since the last pre-election assessment mission. Citizen observer groups YEGA Africa stated that the September 22nd Osun state polls was an improvement over previous elections in Anambra and Ekiti states in the most sensitive and non-sensitive election materials arrived on time, thus facilitating the punctual opening of polling units. Poll workers were deployed early and results were posted in the polling units. The delegation also notes that INEC has improved efforts to recruit staff, particularly women, and provide better training, which can yield more uniform polling unit operations and clear roles and responsibilities among various polling officials. Enhancement of the ballot secrecy. During the Ekiti elections, citizen observer groups as well as IRI NDI delegation noted deficiencies in ballot secrecy in some polling units during the process and offered recommendations to address these issues. For the Osun election, INEC instituted measures that enhanced ballot secrecy, including providing additional guidance to poll workers on the configuration of the polling unit and banning the use of cell phones while voting. Higher consistency of polling officials in guiding voters to roll their ballots, avoid spoiling the ballot, while also obscuring the voter's choice from view. These changes enhance the voter's privacy and reduce the possibility of vote buying and voter intimidation on election day. enhancement to the biometric verification system, software enhancement to the smart card reader have increased the rate of successful verification of voters' biometric data and increased the speed of the voting process. This lessens the burden on voters and polling workers. In addition, smart card readers used for voter accreditation are experiencing fewer malfunctions. Reports from citizen observer groups in Osun State indicated that malfunctions were resolved in timely fashion. Strong commitments by civil society to improve the electoral process. As noted in IRI and NDI's July 2018 statement, civil society is playing a critical role in the area of conflict mitigation, inclusion, voter and civic education, and citizen-based voter observation. During this assessment, IRI-NDI heard about additional initiatives underway, including the Access Nigeria campaign and Center for Citizens with Persons with Disability Advocacy for better inclusion of PWDs on Election Day. As a result of these efforts, INEC adopted the framework on access and participation of persons living with disabilities. Some of the measures were implemented during the Osun State election, such as the use of Braille ballot guide and a form that counts voters with disabilities. Efforts by the International Federation of Women Lawyers to mitigate violence against women has the potential to increase women's participation in the electoral process and deter psychological and physical violence that too often curtails their participation. The Peace and Security Network is coordinating efforts to identify potential risks of election violence and mobilize response efforts. My colleague Anna Jones will continue.
The above improvements, the delegation noted challenges that, if left unaddressed, could limit the ability of Nigerians to experience a fully participatory and credible process. With 140 days left before the elections, there is need to urgently address these issues. 1. Delays in finalizing legal framework for the 2019 elections. The delegation notes consensus among political, civic, and governmental stakeholders on proposed amendments to the Electoral Act 2010, which could improve the credibility and transparency of elections in 2019. After weeks of back and forth between the executive and legislative branches, the bill is currently with the National Assembly, which is slated to reconvene on October 9, 2018. However, delays in the amendments passage have many Nigerians questioning whether INEC will have enough time to implement these changes for the 2019 elections. Delayed release of funds. 2. Delayed release of funds for the 2019 elections. Nigerian interlocutors expressed concerns regarding timely and sufficient funding for the 2019 elections. INEC leadership has affirmed that it will be prepared for elections if the full budget is released when the National Assembly returns to session. Several electoral stakeholders in Nigeria underscored the need for timely logistical and operational. 3. Security threats. Delegates heard continued concerns about persistent insecurity, particularly in the Middle Belt and Northeast, which may be amplified in the pre-election environment. Insecurity, combined with heightened political tensions, raise the likelihood of political and/or communal violence, which could disproportionately impact vulnerable populations, such as internally displaced persons. Should existing conflicts remain unresolved and/or the threat of violence intensify, personal insecurity could deter enthusiasm or prevent citizens from participating in the electoral process. In light of these complex and difficult circumstances, it is incumbent on security services in Nigeria to ensure a safe and secure environment for citizens to exercise their right to vote and to contribute to public confidence in the overall electoral process. Some Nigerians are concerned that security efforts could be used for partisan agendas at the expense of their ability to fulfill their mandate as prescribed by the law. 4. Vote buying. The delegation heard complaints about the lack of robust investigation and, where merited, prosecution of alleged vote buying, despite numerous instances reported by civil society groups. Improvements to the electoral administration and procedure and a higher number of political parties vying for elected positions have enhanced political competition and narrowed margins of victory.
Stakeholders, many of the above-mentioned challenges can be addressed to enhance citizen confidence and participation in elections and mitigate violence during and after the polls. In the spirit of international cooperation, the delegation therefore offers the following recommendations to electoral stakeholders in Nigeria, which build upon and reinforce the recommendations of the first pre-election assessment mission. Recommendations for the federal government of Nigeria. Provide sufficient and timely funds so that INEC and other electoral bodies can fulfill their responsibility as prescribed by law. Ensure the timely passage of the amendment to the Electoral Act 2010. Ensure that security services maintain the highest level of professionalism and impartiality in facilitating the electoral process, refrain from actions that could be seen as motivated by partisan interests, enable accredited observers and journalists to perform their work, and protect the right of citizens to exercise their vote freely. Enforce laws against election malfeasance, including vote buying, and ensure equal and robust application through such measures as the establishment of the Electoral Offences Commission and Tribunal. Respect and uphold press freedom and freedom of information laws in letter and in spirit. Recommendations for the Independent National Electoral Commission. Take concrete measures to combat vote buying through voter education campaigns, enforcement of laws against voter inducement, and nationwide ban on cell phones in the voting cubicle. Enhance as much as possible the physical space for voting to facilitate the processing of voters on election day. Prioritize training for polling officials on configuring polling units to enhance ballot secrecy while maintaining a transparent voting process. Decentralize the permanent voter card collections process from the local government level to the ward and community levels and intensify voter sensitization to increase PVC collection rates. Implement the Person with Disability framework, including operationalizing the Braille Ballot Guide and Form EC30PWD nationwide for Election Day, conducting voter education to increase the participation of people with disabilities in the voting process, and improving accessibility of polling units. Undertake measures to increase understanding of the vote collation process and ensure access of observers and party agents to collation centers. Publish polling units level registration and result data on INEC's website in a machine-readable format. Release specimen ballots well in advance of Election Day so that civil society and other electoral stakeholders can conduct sufficient voter education to orient voters.